So talking about mobile development in 2021, looking at all the different ways you can build mobile apps and the different options that are out there. Quick little thing is, yeah, this is part of the literary festival that Kimberly mentioned. So a combination of codebar and Pragmatic Bookshelf. I am Michael Fazio. I am a professional developer. I use it more generically. Right now, I am an Android developer for a company called Albert, located in the US, that is focused on helping people increase their financial literacy and get themselves into better financial shape, and trying to help, as I call it, kind of more regular people just improve their lives. I'm also a speaker, which happened somehow, and I've been doing this now for years and really enjoy it. And I am also an author of this book, which I just got my physical copy of this weekend. And so I'm very excited about it. But yeah, all about Kotlin and Android development and all the great things you can do. So yeah, but we're gonna be talking in general about mobile development. And so ways you can go ahead and build a mobile app. And really, actually, the better way to put it is an app that can run on a mobile device, because there are different approaches you can take. The kind of standard way we think about this is a native application. And so that's using the native tools and building something directly for whatever device you're using. However, we are now at the point where you have a lot of cross-platform tools. You build an app and then you can deploy it multiple places and, frankly speaking, get quite a good experience. Or you can build things for the mobile web. So we're gonna walk through each of these pieces, kind of see what that entails and what we can do. Again, feel free to drop any questions in chat. I will be kind of peeking back a little bit to see if anybody needs anything. Otherwise, there will be time at the end for any questions or anything you're wondering about. So we will start with the native application development. And so I'm focusing today on Android and iOS. And so Android is written, you write an app for Android in Kotlin. That is the programming language. That's what you use to go ahead and build out your applications. On the iOS side, we're looking at Swift. And both are wonderful languages. I mean, obviously I love Kotlin, given that I wrote a book on it. Like, it's fantastic to work with. I know I've talked to plenty of iOS developers that are big fans of what you have from Swift. And this is building the app with the tools and the languages that were kind of, I guess, originally intended by the usually phone but device makers. And so it's going to be your kind of truest experience for each of the platforms. Now, I will mention, you can go ahead and you can build native applications in Java and Objective-C. These are kind of the legacy languages. There's plenty out there. They're fine, but frankly speaking, please don't. Kotlin and Swift are the better approaches to take. And there's a lot more advantages of those that you don't get from these older languages. So those are really the approaches you want to take are Kotlin and Swift, as we see here. Now, we're going to be doing a lot of positive and negatives with all these different approaches. And so we'll kind of walk through each of the parts here. With regards to native applications, it's the native platform. These are really the ways that you're expecting the apps to really work. They're how they were originally intended to be developed. It's like the real way to develop the apps. And I say that very loosely because the options we have are very good. But you're going to get good performance. You're going to get really good integrations. You're going to have kind of everything you need with it. All the libraries that are out there will have support. You have everything you need for it. And another great part is you've got a lot of wonderful resources that are out there. There's tutorials everywhere. There's all kinds of things. There's books. I had to mention it again. There are books out there. It's really going to be a good experience that the code and all the tools you're working with should not get in your way. Now, it's not perfect to go ahead and build these native apps in their native languages. You end up with separate apps. If you say, hey, I want to build an application for mobile, and I want it to run on Android and I want it to run on iOS, you have two separate applications with two separate code bases, two separate everything. Now, the logic that you have in each one can be kind of shared in the sense that you know how things work, but you're dealing with two completely separate pieces. So you have to be able to handle all those parts. Now, I will recommend if somebody is working on a native application and it's on the two different platforms, generally you're going to need some kind of, as we call it, backend API. So something that's running on a server somewhere that the apps will call, and they'll load all their data in and they'll display everything for users. You can move a lot of your logic there so that the APIs handle a lot of the, as we call it, business logic, all the specific things for whatever your app's supposed to do. A lot of that can be moved to that the web part where, and not web as in website, but web as in APIs, the data that's coming into the apps. A lot of that can be done there. And so you only have it in one spot. And then you're focused more on how you display it on each of your apps. But again, separate apps, separate languages can be kind of a pain. And just in particular with Android, but a little bit with both, it can be a little slow to redeploy your app out to whatever device you're working with. So you go, oh, I'm going to make this change. Now I have to wait for maybe a couple of minutes, maybe even 30 seconds to test out my changes, whereas other options can be a lot faster. So again, native app, really, really good experience, but you're looking at two separate applications, two separate everything to deal with it. That particular challenge led to the kind of progression of cross-platform options. And this is the idea that I write an app and I can deploy it to Android and iOS from my one app. And there's different ways to handle it. There's different ways to do it, but it saves you a lot of trouble in having to worry about two separate general parts. And so today, the three I want to cover are React Native, XAMARIN, and FLUTTER. And order-wise, it's actually going to be FLUTTER, React Native, and XAMARIN based on their popularity out in the general tech space. So we'll start with FLUTTER. And FLUTTER is a cross-platform framework that is focused in particular on really smooth, really nice-looking UI. So things pop up nicely, everything just scrolls really well. It feels really comfortable for a user. It's made by Google, which some people may see as a positive or a negative, but it's a big company. It's going to have the support. It's not like Flutter is just going to disappear, though I say that and realize that Google has a tendency to kill things sometimes, but it's not like it's just kind of out of nowhere. There are a number of positives to using Flutter. As I mentioned, it's really smooth. They've set it up in a way where all of the UI components are being rendered on it's kind of a separate rendering engine, and everything comes in really nicely, really smoothly, and it's going to look great. There's this concept of hot reload where you can go into your code, you make your changes, and it'll show up on your device within like a second or two, as opposed to having to do a full redeploy every single time. This saves you a ton of time when you're doing development, gets things out there, and just lets you move a lot faster and making sure everything's doing what you want. Also, I mentioned before, cross-platform, like Flutter is like super multi-platform, kind of I'm going to write an app and I can deploy this wherever I want. Android, iOS, websites, Windows, Mac, Linux, like it works everywhere and it looks good everywhere. So really, really cool approach. And this is all kind of due to that focus on UI, the widgets that are out there that you can quickly add something to a screen. Like it's a really quick development experience. Now, it's not perfect because they've got all those widgets that are there and they show up, and here's your different buttons and your lists and your scroll views and all these different things that go into an app. And they're based on the standards that Android and iOS use, but they're not exactly the same components. And so if you're looking for something that looks exactly like an Android app or exactly like an iOS app, Flutter won't quite get you there. It'll be close enough. It'll align to the standards. It'll probably be fine, but it's not quite native. Another tricky part is Flutter uses Dart, which is a language from Google. It's less used. It's a nice language, but it's less used. So you don't have quite the number of resources. You don't have the number of developers out there that know Dart and really love Dart. I mean, there's certainly some, because again, it's a nice language, but it's not as well known as some of the other languages that are there. And something you'll see with a lot of these multi-platform libraries is, or sorry, multi-platform frameworks is, you don't have the library support. You don't have the ability to connect to all the native components on the phone quite as easily as you would with a truly native app. So this is, as you're going to see through all this, there's lots of these trade-offs that it works better for a lot of things, but some parts are going to be more challenging. With a lot of the cross-platform, some of the libraries just won't work out of the box with things for the apps. So, all right. React Native. Now, I'm betting at least some people on here have heard of React. It is a JavaScript library that is out there, and React Native allows you to go ahead and use React and build mobile apps, that actually compile down to a native experience. It's created by Facebook, but React is actually very good. If you're one that doesn't want anything to do with Facebook, I wouldn't blame you. And it would, you'd be kind of stuck on the React part, but React is a very, very, very nice tool. And again, a larger company that is going to be supporting this for quite a while. There are, again, a ton of positives to React. Mainly, it's React, it's JavaScript, it's super popular web framework, super popular web language. It's things that people know. There's tons of resources out there. They're really nice to deal with. I've done a lot of work with React and JavaScript. I like both of them quite a bit. It's a really nice dev experience from that perspective. It has fast refresh, which is very similar to the hot reload that you see with Flutter. So you can go ahead, you can make changes, they show up a lot quicker, and you're ready to keep moving along. And again, unlike Flutter, they are rendering native controls. So React will take whatever you built out with all your little pieces that you put together. That's how React works. Is I've described it as, imagine you're building with Legos. You have all these little components that you fit together, and you end up with this singular structure. That's how React works. Is you build your components, you put them all together, you get an app, whether it's a web app or a React Native app for mobile. And so when all those components are there together, they then get rendered down into native controls. So things look exactly like they would if you're building a native app. So really, really, really nice experience. Now, it's not perfect. From what I've seen in different tests, there are certain scenarios where the performance is worst with React Native versus a native app. And in particular, a much higher level of CPU usage and a lot more battery being used. And so like when you get in particular like heavy animations that are happening, React's using like 3 and 4 times the battery during that process. Now, for a lot of apps, it's probably fine. It's not a big deal, but something that you need to be aware of when you're going into it. I mentioned I like JavaScript, and it's really, really nice. JavaScript is also really, really good at allowing you to shoot yourself in the foot. And I know a lot of developers I've talked to that hate JavaScript. They hate dealing with it. They hate the conventions. There's a lot of quirks and a lot of weirdness with it. And so it can be a little tricky. Some of this can be mitigated by using TypeScript, which is a Microsoft product that adds more strict typing. So all right, I have this item, it is a number, and I have this, it's a string. So it's text. I have this and it's this type. You have more specifics with that. That's what TypeScript allows you. But JavaScript, I like it. Not everyone does, and it can be a little bit, it can be a little bit tricky to make sure you're not messing something up with it. And again, library support is a little bit more limited than a normal native application because there are these kind of translations that have to happen to work with something in React Native when it's trying to talk to the device. Also, again, depending on your views, a negative here could be the fact that Facebook is connected and involved to React Native. There's also XAMARIN. This is another cross-platform framework. This is a one from Microsoft using C# and is really focused on using XAML, which is a version of XML to build out a lot of your UI. So XML, for reference for people, is the kind of parent of HTML. So you have a lot of braces with types inside, and you add attributes and you do different things that way. That's how you're handling a lot of your UI for XAMARIN. So again, Microsoft product, which again, big company, a lot of support, a lot of tools that are out there, a lot of things you can use with it. So, and it's also a very nice tool to use as well. Lots of positives again. You can see the trend here. These cross-platform tools, and this was definitely not always the case. The cross-platform options for mobile development now are really, really nice. And so you're definitely in a better spot going ahead and looking through one of these. So in particular with XAMARIN, this is compiling down to native as well, and will give you very, very similar to native performance when you're going ahead and you're working with building out your apps. C# is super well known and a very well documented, well received language that's out there. It's great to work with. I've done quite a bit of work in XAMARIN with C#, and it's really, really, really nice. And one thing that's kind of unique about XAMARIN is you have multiple approaches you can take for a cross-platform app. So if you want something like you have with Flutter and React Native, where I'm going to build out this one app and I'm going to build out my UI, and XAMARIN's going to take care of translating things to Android and iOS and actually like native Windows apps on Windows, you can do that with XAMARIN Forms. Or you can do XAMARIN Native, where you say, I have a shared chunk of code here in the middle, but then each of my UI projects are separate for iOS and Android, so I can really dig in and more or less mimic what I would do on each native side while benefiting from code reuse. There's some of the marketing materials from Microsoft claims that with a XAMARIN app, you can achieve up to 90% code reuse with a XAMARIN app. And I've worked on a production one for a while. We were going the native route, and we really were able to pull a ton of code out into the shared library that we had to use on both of the platforms. So it's a really nice tool. Again, not perfect. One of the main things with it is you have to use Visual Studio. And if you're using that in a professional setting, there is a license that goes with it. And even just the professional license, not even the enterprise level that gives you more stuff, is like thousands of dollars a year. And so the cost can be very prohibitive. I will say, if you want to learn how XAMARIN works, you can grab the community edition of Visual Studio. I believe it should be totally free for all the XAMARIN dev that you need, and you can work on things as you wish. And so that allows you to get in there and really see how it works and do a lot of work without having to spend that money up front. But again, the cost on a professional level is very, very expensive. It has hot reload, but it doesn't work quite as well as some of the other tools. And this is more of a personal experience when I've been working with the XAMARIN app. It's not to the level of a Flutter or a React Native. Now it's there, pieces do work, they are improving it, it's getting better, but it's not quite there. And again, as you've seen with the other ones, there's trouble with libraries. In particular, XAMARIN has this concept of binding libraries to say, here's a native library, here's how I want to use it. And the work that goes in for that translation is really kind of tedious on the XAMARIN side. Probably something that it will get better in the future. It's gotten better, but it's still not perfect. So there's some work to do there. Now, I mentioned these different cross-platform tools that are out there to build more native apps, and again, very, very similar to a native experience for these different apps. But I think what gets lost sometimes is if you want something that multiple people can use on different devices and different things like that, you've got a web browser. And everybody's phone has a web browser. Everybody's tablet has a web browser. Everybody's computer now has a web browser. They're universally supported. So don't forget about mobile web, because you might be a little surprised about what you can do with a mobile website currently. And so everybody's got the different browsers they like, and you can build an app and it'll run on Chrome and Firefox and Safari, on Mac, on Windows, on iOS, on Android, everywhere you want. And there's a number of positives because, it's everywhere and it's super handy, and it's great to be able to go ahead and hit a website. You're only dealing with one code base, so everything's in one little website, and you don't have to deal with app stores. Again, I love mobile development, but trying to get an app out to the app stores, to the Android App Store, and especially the Apple App Store, so I guess Google Play Store and Apple App Store, is a pain in the butt. It's not a fun experience. It's good in the sense that apps are reviewed before they get to the App Store to keep people safer. It's bad when you have an event on Friday night and you find a bug Friday morning and it can't get through the review process. That gets to be really tricky. If you have a mobile website, you can deploy out. Usually it's going to be on some kind of cloud hosting provider. You say, all right, here's our changes. Let's go through our process, and boom, the website's updated. The bugs are fixed. You can do that with mobile web. Really, really handy. Now, there are some negatives. You do lack some of the native functionality. Now, not quite as many as you may think, but if you want biometrics, so like if I go ahead and I take my phone and I'm using the fingerprint reader on the back, I can't really integrate with that well on a website. I can't use some of the more ingrained security features of the phone, but you do have access to the camera. You do have access to the GPS and your user's location. You do have access to all these different parts that are out there, just not everything. And so be aware of what's available, what's not, when you're going ahead and you're building out your web app. Offline support gets to be a lot trickier. And this is a big thing with mobile development in general, is handling how people interact with your application when they don't have connectivity. You do have a way with mobile web to save things after a user's gone to your site in local storage, so that if they don't have connectivity, they can still see some things. But it's not the same as a native app where they install the app, they have everything they need right away, and you know exactly what they have. So it makes it a lot easier to handle those offline scenarios for somebody. And mobile web, like in particular with games, really doesn't work if you have more involved apps, heavier animations. Again, some of the integrations that are there within a device, it doesn't work as well from a website as it does from a native app. And actually, really, another negative I can throw in here is sometimes users just want to have a mobile app to go to. It looks better for a company to have a mobile app versus having just a website. Even if they do the exact same thing, people will look at it better if you say, here is my actual mobile app. So it doesn't work quite as well with a website. All right, so final thoughts on this, and it's kind of summarizing everything we just talked about here. The best experience you can have is native. And I put an asterisk on the end of that because it may not be the best for you or for your team or your company, because you do have those separate apps. It's a lot more work, and it may not get you as much benefit as you may want. Because frankly speaking, the cross-platform options are really good. Not just good, really good. I should have put more really good on here because they are. They're excellent what they've been able to do. The tools are really nice. The hot reload type features are really handy. And a lot of users won't be able to tell a difference. For any of you that use Facebook's app or Instagram, that's written in React Native. And a lot of people, they'd have no idea it wasn't a true native app because of what these cross-platform tools can do. Again, web is the easiest as far as getting it out to people and getting users into just get to your content. You're missing some functionality, but you may not need it. Also, one little fun thing I saw somebody mention the other day, if you have a website, users can uninstall it. They can get rid of your app and throw it away and whatever. They can't uninstall your website. So if they go 3 months later and go, wait, I wanted to check on this app. Oh, I don't have the app anymore, and they forget about it and they don't use it. If it's a website, they can just pull up the site and go, oh, I can go here again and check out whatever I need, and they get back engaged really quickly. So a couple little credits. I grabbed some of the icons from flaticon.com. They are all free with attribution. And so there's a ton out there. I use some in the book. I use some otherwise. They're really, really nice. And just a shout out to this techaheadcorp.com. They had a blog that had that cross-platform image from earlier, and it was perfect. So I decided to use it from them. So thank you to them for that. And at this point, do we have any questions? I will check the chat. Feel free to jump in and ask as you need to. I'm trying to see here. I don't see any of them in chat. So yeah, feel free. Any questions that anyone has? What questions do you have right now? Do that.
Everyone is stunned into silence.
Hopefully not everybody's asleep, but I did see one question in the chat about other approaches like Unity, Qt. So Unity is the biggest one. And when I was talking about games, Unity is probably the best for that, because you can create a game and then deploy it out on desktop and mobile, and it works really nicely. And so in particular, from a gaming and very, very visual app like that, Unity is awesome. I went ahead and skipped out a little bit on some of the other cross-platform tools. There's Ionic, which I have a soft spot for because the team for that, and it's headquartered from like an hour from where I am in Madison, Wisconsin. So, and I know a couple people from there, and they're wonderful. But it's a little bit different approach, and it's a little bit less popular than some of the others. There's like Titanium, PhoneGap, some of these older tools that were more, we're gonna basically make a website that's gonna run on your phone, and it looked like a website that ran on your phone, so it's not quite up to that same level. So there are other options as well. I just focused on kind of the three like major cross-platform tools that are out there. So progressive web apps. I think PWAs, so progressive web apps, are really cool. They offer a lot of extra functionality, and really you can get something on a mobile website that to just a normal user will look like an app. Some of the offline, like I mentioned, you can go ahead and you can cache away data and save it off for that. And there's just like, you can add a loading screen and really do some of the things that are there. I feel like PWAs haven't taken off quite as much as I would have thought. I think what's happened is people have taken bits and pieces from them, but really haven't totally tapped into what's out there. And so it works for a lot of scenarios. Like I said, mobile web is probably fine for a lot of scenarios for people, and the features you get from a progressive web app help that as well, but it's not quite the same. So it's a lot of this is just, what's your use case? What do you need to integrate with, and what matters with your app is the biggest part there. I'm not even gonna try to speak on Erlang because I've never used it. So I'm gonna skip that one. Sorry. Let's see. So yeah, React Native compilation different than Flutter. My understanding is, and I'm not well versed in the internals of Flutter and React Native past. I know Flutter is running on a rendering engine that goes on the device to go ahead and run everything so smoothly, whereas React Native, I think, does compile down to more the bytecode level, like native components. I can't go into detail on that just because I'm not as familiar with that low level with it. But my understanding is like XAMARIN and React Native are more going the low level, whereas Flutter is kind of hitting that higher layer on the rendering engine to make things smoother. Dan, I can't speak on Rust. Honestly, the biggest thing I know about with Rust is that every time you see a Stack Overflow survey and people ask about Rust, it is by far the #1 language that everybody loves. Like, it just far and away, like, it's the most loved language and has been for like 4 years. It's kind of amazing. No, React Native is I think Flutter just passed React Native as the most popular cross-platform option, and then it's React Native, and then I think it's XAMARIN, but actually, I think there might be holdover. It depends on what you look at with, I don't think it's still PhoneGap. I think there's other ones, but like when you're looking at, here's the approaches to take, the three I mentioned are kind of the biggest three that are out there. Flutter is the best option. It depends on what you want, because it depends on the integrations. I think Flutter is going to be kind of taking over as like the #1 option for people, But as it turns out, you've got multiple really good options with Flutter and React Native and XAMARIN. And XAMARIN has a version coming up called Maui that is going to be mobile and desktop. And I don't think there's going to be web integration, but is going to increase the feature set and really integrate things more with the .NET platform, and is going to make the development experience nicer there. Flutter, like I said, Flutter is a really, really good one. I hesitate saying best because there's a bit of a give and take with it, but I don't think you could go wrong using any of those three, frankly. I know it's a bit of a cop out, but you're going to be in good shape, all of them. Future for the industry. There's always going to be a place for the Kotlin and Swift native true apps, because those are the real examples. But if you are looking at smaller companies, you're looking at startups that are out there, you're looking at companies that are like, we can't spend the budget to have 6 Android and 6 iOS developers, the cross-platform tools are going to be really useful. And I think that all that's going to happen as we go forward is those tools are going to get better and better at integrating into the apps and doing a better job of integrating with the native libraries and really having a almost native experience. And honestly, in a lot of cases, it will be just as good on a native version versus a Flutter or React Native or Xamarin version. Like, it's not going to make a difference. Your users won't be able to tell. Even if you had a side-by-side, you may not be able to tell. So I think it's going to be, we'll always have the native, but I think for a while, these cross-platform tools that are out here are going to be available and be very, very valuable to a lot of companies. So React is the framework and helps with how the UI is laid out. JavaScript is the language you would use to write React apps. And so Dart and JavaScript would be kind of in line. And Dart, I think Dart is more so similar to like a TypeScript than a JavaScript, without getting too much into the nitty-gritty with that. JavaScript is dynamically typed, which means I have a variable and I assign something to it, whether it's a number or an object which has multiple pieces in it, or a list, or some text, so a string, and I can just change on the fly what's in there. Whereas other languages are, you declare a number, it's always a number, do not change that, it's a number, or I will get really confused. The benefit there is, if you go ahead and you send something into a function or a method that's going to execute some chunk of code, you can verify what type of data is coming in. Whereas with JavaScript, you can't, but you're also not fighting with declaring types all over the place. You just say, I have a variable, I'm going to use it, and I'm just going to let it go. So there's a lot less overhead, but there are also fewer safeguards. So again, trade-offs. Yeah, Dart plus Flutter for mobile is perfect. Dart plus web is kind of painful. It's like, yeah, and the web part is definitely newer. It's definitely less kind of fleshed out, because mobile was the main focus, and then web has kind of been the version 2 getting out there and doing more there. So there are going to be more challenges on the website, and especially the desktop side. Yeah, hard to switch from Flutter to React Native. There are challenges because they are significantly different in the languages and how you organize things. I will say, going the other way, I don't remember if React Native has tutorials on it, but I know Flutter has it where, hey, if you've done React Native, or you've done Kotlin Android / Java Android, or if you've done native iOS, like, here's how you can transition over. And when you think about, like in Android, if you think about a recycler view, in Flutter, it's a list, and here's what the list is, or maybe a different term, but like a recycler view is a specific type of list in Android. If you've worked with this and you know these pieces, here's how it translates to Flutter. And so they have the documentation that's out there to kind of help you bounce back and forth. Oh, that is a good question about, so Pranav asked about doing machine learning in Flutter and using things like CoreML or TensorFlow. I have not done that. My guess actually is that, yes, there is some level of support. I don't know if it's going to be fully featured, but given that, like with TensorFlow, there's Google interaction there, and Flutter is a Google product. I'm guessing that there's at least some things you can do, maybe even like a TensorFlow Lite version of it. So, but that would be one to check on, because that there's a lot that goes into that, and I don't know what the level of support is there. Yeah, I mean, if you want to do, my guess is yes, there is that ML support for Flutter, but I can't say for sure because I haven't dealt with it to see what kind of support there is. But just in general, Flutter seems to be the platform that you can get up and running with the quickest to get something useful. And then you have both platforms, and then you can tie in some of the libraries. So I would say that would be your best place to start. Do a little bit of checking on it to see if the library support is there, because I think it would be, but I can't say for sure on that. Angular for mobile. There is an Angular framework for mobile. It's not nearly as popular, but it is out there. And I remember correctly, I think a version of Ionic, I don't know if it's the old version or if it's both old and new, but a version of Ionic actually did have Angular support. I feel like they more recently switched to React, but it might be one of those where they support multiple versions. But yeah, unfortunately, Angular does not have the level of support on mobile that React does. But again, in part is because Facebook said, hey, we got React, we're going to make the mobile version. They pushed it forward, whereas the Angular team has not had that backing as much because it just, there's Flutter that's available out there. But yeah, check out Ionic, see what support they still have. I think Ionic 2 or 3, I'm out of date on what they have out there, but they've got, they at least had Angular support at one point. I think it still should be there, but we can double check that. So native and cross-platform in the same app code base. This is not something I've done because usually it's one or the other. Besides, with some of the cross-platform tools, you can go ahead and you can have native integrations. So you might have a little bit with that where you can tie it in. That being said, I've seen that there's supposed to be a way where you can take React native code and go ahead and use native parts within it and like have them both in the same area. So you have interoperability between React Native and native components. So you check on that. Yeah, and so when you're dealing with React Native, there are some of those kind of translation layers that can happen. And I don't remember the specifics now with React Native for doing those translation parts. So I'd have to double check on that. But yeah, there's ways to do integrations there. So yeah, I think that should be it. I will hang out here for a little bit in case somebody else thinks of a question in the next couple of minutes. But otherwise, thank you to everybody that hopped on from all over the world, which is really cool. And hope everybody has a good day.